Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new meeting for Working Group Bash. Today is April 28th. As you all know, this meeting is recorded, will be uploaded to YouTube. Please adhere to Kubernetes community guidelines. We have 3 items on the agenda. The first is request for comment from Marlo on a proposal for kubelet resource plugin. Marlo?
Hi. So this particular document came out of a basically a different one that was done through SIG scheduling and SIG node, where we were trying to find all the uncovered CPU use cases. And I'll put a link to that doc here if you want to read up more. But when you go through and start digging through all the things not covered by kubelet, there's a whole bunch of features that are not there. So you can't mix pinned with shared cores. You can't choose which NUMA zone. So if you want to always schedule to NUMA zone 0, you can't do that. You can't spread containers across NUMA zones currently. Different types of cores are not covered. So if you have something where you have 2 different types of cores in a CPU, you can't choose accordingly. The cores are allocated by container, not by pod. So I can't have a pod, choosing which container and having subcontainers inside, which is sometimes used in HPC compute. You can't handle affinity of anything below node level, so I can't choose, node affinities. This goes along with the NUMA zone, but also with other resources. You can't ask for more CPUs after you've knitted your pod. We don't support CPU or memory-less nodes, and you still have a max 8 NUMA zone limitation. And when you start looking at getting all of these features in, it just snowballs, right? Because it's beyond CPU management. It's also then once you fix the CPU part, now you have to go fix the memory part, and what are the consequences, etc. The way other companies are sometimes handling this is you have like the node resource pooler or CPU pooler by Nokia. You have CRIRM, which is by Intel, which does the resource management through the runtimes, but still can't handle pod level. It's still container level only. We need a better way to handle this. So when I was speaking with Derek Carr, who's one of the SIG node people, he suggested that we split kubelet into control and data planes. So that's where that piece comes from. And basically the control plane, we end up doing a plugin type model. So we roll up the current topology manager, CPU manager, memory manager, and device manager components into a plugin, following kind of how we do other plugins now. And then continue to expose resources through the data plane to the scheduler. So we're looking for comments. I think this is incredibly valid for batch case scheduling because you are looking for high performance compute. So these things do change what your performance metrics are, and making this so that we can have various plugins for particular use cases for CPU management, I think is helpful instead of trying to configure kubelet all the way across and, kind of hard setting. Go ahead.
I have 2 questions, but I just wanted to open to the community first before I ask mine.
I have a few comments related to the proposal that you have, Marlo. One of the things that I think would be extremely beneficial in this case would be if we captured like more design details on how exactly do we want to achieve this. At what level? Is it at container manager level that we are going to have a component that is exposed that handles some of these plugins and maybe registers them, similar to how device plugin works? And the other important thing would be while these plugins are kind of introduced in the cluster, how do the existing components coexist? So some users might be completely okay having topology manager, memory manager, and all these components the way they are. So how do they coexist, and what is the plan for transition? I think those
So,
are the key questions here.
all right, I'm going to address your second one first. I said at the very beginning that, and also encapsulated in here, that the current plugin, I'm sorry, the current managers would by themselves be the default plugin. So if you just deploy kubelet as is, the default is the managers that are currently there rolled into one of the plugins. Okay.
Okay.
So that's your default. So your default does not change, because part of it is not to break current functionality, right? The joke is bug for bug compatibility, but that's essentially what we would be focusing on. And that is listed in the non-goals. So very specifically in the non-goal section, we will not break any existing use cases for topology manager, memory manager, or device manager.
Sure.
But additionally, before we start doing design, I want to finish getting in comments on what the requirements are, and then we can start looking at a more specific design. The point is there are pieces in the non-goals that do restrict us, so plugins should not be writing to the API themselves. We'll be able to support our current pod specs, right? Latency is a big deal, so we need to make sure that the latency is not increased, right? And our default behavior will follow the current pieces right here.
I think what would be useful, for example, that I saw just that statement that plugins should not write to the API themselves, but the plugins would have to communicate with the kubelet APIs. So if we captured some of those components and how that interaction happens, that would be beneficial. In terms of like the other things that would be beneficial here would be from user perspective and from, say, sysadmin perspective. How do we see these plugins being deployed in the cluster, and how their workflow changes or looks like with the introduction of this mechanism? I think at this point in time, it'd benefit, even if we don't capture the design, just end-to-end flow of how we foresee this implementation happening.
There is some pieces in the design proposal on the implementation, so I encourage you to read that and perhaps contribute if you have any thoughts on it.
Okay.
Aldo?
Is it already clear if the plugins are, I don't know, like extra daemon sets, or they are in tree, or are people expected to add their plugins and compile their own kubelet? What is that
So,
open or
yeah, so
is
that
it?
it's somewhat open. I envisioned us working through some sort of gRPC interface for these. So it could be, because it needs to work with two different things. Some people will want to deploy it as a daemon set, and some people will want to use, say, NRI. So there's the NRI piece that they still don't really have a good way to get their resources through. So they're also looking to leverage this. So it needs to be generic enough that it doesn't matter how you deploy the plugin. The current in-tree plugins will still follow the current set of managers.
But in general, it's supposed to be gRPC or some other form of IPC.
Correct. Yeah.
I just follow up on that. Like the current managers, they are linked in, right? Like they compiled into the kubelet.
Yeah, they're compiled in. And currently the way the other added tree managers are working is they're turning off all the capabilities in the kubelet and then running outside and managing the resources outside. I would like, we're looking at a more native way of doing this. This also enables, groups like Kubatch to release things or release, plugins that are specific for particular use cases.
Like they hack the kubelet so that it calls out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly how every single one of them works.
Any other questions from the community before I ask mine?
I have another one. Um, I'm usually going back to Patrick's proposal. I don't know how this relates to it. And the reason why I ask is because it's already an approved cap. If even if the implementation was not approved, the cap itself was approved. So if there is any relationship um, and if it's it's being reconciled with that.
Could you please link Patrick's proposal so I can make sure it's what?
I don't think the CAPE was approved.
It was not. Maybe I misremember. I'll have a look now.
Please link me into that conversation because if there's already some work done in this direction, it would be good to coordinate.
Yeah, so that is basically my first question. We have Patrick's proposal on dynamic resource allocation. You already linked that in from your doc, I think.
Oh yeah, that was it's kind of a part way, but it doesn't. Yeah. So
Right.
this is a device plugins.
But like still for us, I mean, people who are not deeply involved in this whole thing, it is not, at least for me, it's not quite clear the how they all play together. This what you're proposing, Patrick's proposal, and the topology aware scheduling, set of controllers and efforts that that are going on. So it would be nice if part of the that RFC, if possible, like clarifies what does each of these things, what do each of these efforts try to address, and whether they're complementary or orthogonal. At least that would help me understand better whether we should, for example, continue to whether there's any dependencies, whether they can make progress independently, etc.
Okay, I can go talk to Patrick directly.
Okay, yeah, and it's still because you also mentioned here things related to this, like the affinity. I mean, the topology aware scheduling is kind of related to that, right? Like it's not necessarily addressing this specific point, but it is trying to expose node topology to the scheduler, right? And maybe I'm misunderstanding something,
Right. Well,
but it feels related.
Yeah, they are related, but there's two parts. So every time you look at this, right? One of it is the scheduling. Where does it land? And the second one is after it lands, how are the resources allocated? So the kubelet does the latter.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily doing what specifically you want. So you can have it land on the node and pray that it ends up in the right place, but that doesn't always work.
Right, but you need to interface, right? Like between the two things. Like for example, if we wanted to introduce pod, I don't know, the affinities are going to be like at the container level or the pod level. And once we define them, you need the scheduler to act, right? Like based on the whatever things that we're doing right now. And then once it gets to the kubelet, you want to communicate that decision, right, to kubelet and say, okay, it was, for example, scheduled on that specific NUMA node. So I understand that they are complementary, like one is the kubelet, one is the scheduler, but there is some interfacing that needs to be clarified a little bit here. So that's, I guess, what I'm asking.
Yeah, I understand. My assumption is that currently so first cut would be to basically take the current plugin or the current device managers, right, and follow the same process and then mature it over time as you need more capabilities from the scheduler standpoint regarding what's on the resources.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it would be good, but this is related to the future design of this. It's taking those into account, because if you need specific APIs or specific plumbing to be done to relay this type of information down to the kubelet, we should probably look at this from the get-go, from the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure it's right to do beyond what the kubelet's currently doing at that level, because you do have Prometheus and you do have other ways to information gather and then make scheduling decisions outside of having to route everything through kubelet. So there's more than one route. And if say Francesco has a problem, has it.
Okay. Because you mentioned like cannot choose which NUMA zone as well.
Yeah.
Is this like a user choice, or like you want that to be a user choice, or?
I don't think it should be a user choice necessarily, but if you know, for instance, the specifics of your system and all your NUMA zeros are closer to or have better network, or this, it's contrived, right? The NUMA zone, but any affinity below the node level. So if I want something next to particular switches, right, because I know they're faster, because I have some sort of mixed switching,
Okay.
I should be able to choose according to affinity of resources instead of just choosing affinity of the node, right?
Okay.
Francesca?
Hey, hello. So from topology perspective, it is partially related to this topic. I just want to, because the conversation went about the possible overlap. So I'm just giving some bit of context from the perspective of what we are doing and did in the topology, our scheduling initiative we are pursuing. So we are actually intentionally avoiding to the scheduler drive the choice of the NUMA zone. And this is intentional, and there is not a clear cut. Actually, this is a quite hot topic. Back in time when the decision was made, the consensus in the community was like exposing this level of detail, having the scheduling driving this decision will be against basically the look and feel of Kubernetes. So it was something we are avoiding. That we are exploring options. We have a door open to exploring options, but that felt too imperative in a way. So from our perspective, this is something that we are avoiding intentionally. And again, this is the context from our side is only partially related to this topic. So this is why I wanted kind of to, have a side note. So
just to clarify, like currently the thing that you're doing with NUMA scheduling is to like make sure that there's enough zones
yes
on the
yes
node that can handle
yes
the part, whether they
yes
okay.
yes
But not necessarily choose a specific zone.
yes again, this was something that felt too, I don't have a right word, so bear with me. It felt, really too imperative, and it's still open. This is just to give you folks context. We are not, we are not doing that just yet for this reason. It's open. If we want to have another discussion and say, hey, there is a way to do that, well, we are open to that. But today we do that for this reason mostly. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing related to this is if, for example, the scheduler decides a particular NUMA node, the kubelet is the one that is actually responsible for allocating those resources. So it could be, there should be a way to relay that information to kubelet. First of all, like the whole idea about doing this itself, like Francesco explained, is kind of controversial. And then even from implementation point of view, the scheduler could make, even if it does, the kubelet could make another decision, and then we are kind of back to square one. And that is another consideration here.
My second question, a high-level question, is like a follow-up to exactly this. So I've heard from Slurm community, like with Slurm, there are people on this call way more experienced with this scheduler. The scheduler is able to select a specific NUMA zone within a node. Like that's part of what their bread and butter. Like they are able to make these decisions. It's part of their scheduling logic. And one of the schedules that I had with this Slurm community in the past is that they are struggling with this with Kubernetes. They want to deploy Slurm on Kubernetes, whether it's below or under, like or in parallel. But one thing they're struggling with is exactly this, and that's, I guess, another thing that I would advise Marlo to perhaps reach out to Slurm community, because they could give some feedback on what they expect to control. And that would open the door for Slurm to be deployed on Kubernetes in a more native way. That would be win for the HPC community in general.
Okay,
I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think that's a great idea. Are you able to connect me with
Yeah, I'll
a
connect
couple
you with it.
people there? That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll-
Yeah, I'm familiar with Slurm. I started off with HPC, so it would be good to connect with them.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll connect you with the person the contact that I have.
Many thanks. Also, I do encourage people to write directly into the doc any concerns or design suggestions. That would be super helpful.
All right, thank you, Marlo. Second agenda item. Okay, it's me. So I just wanted to mention this quickly. I was with Aldo was trying to write an issue to explain this use case, but I didn't get the time to. It was just like yesterday that this one popped up. So we had a customer that was trying to use index job to run basically many independent tasks. The job itself as a whole is, they don't care whether the job as a whole succeeds or fails. They just want every index to actually execute. And at the end, they would just want to see, okay, for example, you execute one, like you say 1,000 completions that you want to execute, and so you will have indices from 0 to 999. They want every index to get a chance to get executed, and then at the end you get this, like maybe in the job status, for example, which ones have failed, which one succeeded. This, like the related issue that Aldo linked to here is in the same spirit. One solution could be to, for example, have back-off limits per index rather than at the job level. But those back-off limits don't decide whether the whole job fails or not. Rather, how many times I need to try a specific index, but always try every index. I don't know if this use case was discussed before, especially Magic. I don't know if this was discussed in the past in SIG apps when the job API was being developed.
No, I don't recall any discussion as such. Something of a similar nature we already have, but in a much more simplified version, is when you can, if I remember correctly, you don't define completions, and you can define parallelism, and it will just kick off as many as parallelism says, and the first one that completes makes the entire job completed. Can't remember if that was with completions not set or one of them, but what you're describing would be a reasonable approach.
Yeah. So there is a precedent to this. You see my screen, right? Like AWS batch. So in AWS batch, there is array jobs. In there, they have this mode where, like, you know, this is a job, and then those are, like, they call them child jobs. And it says here, like, you can cancel or terminate individual child jobs without affecting the other child jobs. And so I guess that's the mode that they want to operate in. I think it's reasonable to achieve some parity with in general, like how index jobs work and other schedulers.
One question, the description that you mentioned says that if a child array job fails, the parent job also fails.
I'm assuming here it doesn't mean that it failed, like the whole job is considered failed, but not that it will stop executing.
I mean, so you basically want run everything, but do not continue running the indexes that failed, but just leave them as where they are. And the overall status will be reflecting if at least one failed, it's still a failed job, even though it'll be 99, let's say, out of 199 successes and one failed. We still want to see the overall status as failed. We just won't retry that single job.
Yeah, and maybe we can have a definition for failed as well. For example, if specific percent, but maybe this is too much.
Yeah, it's a level of detail how much we want to say failed, if it's like a partial failed or
Right.
total failure or something like that. I wonder if that isn't similar to what was brought up. I think that was last time when there was a discussion about Aldo brought it up about rerun selected indices in an index job mode, but there people were interested in ensuring that a particular index is actually running to a full success. So probably I would double check what we currently do, and it definitely sounds a reasonable approach, being able to specify, oh, in an index job, just make sure that it all succeeds and do whatever it takes, even if that means rerunning a single index 100 times or more to get it to succeed, or just let it fail and reflect that in a status. That's definitely something that that would be supportive of. I guess that will be part of the index completion mode.
Yeah, it's definitely related. Aldo?
Yeah, I think the request can be simplified as a failure policy. Like the current policy is that when we declare a job fail, we remove any running pods. So the request here is do not do that, just continue. Sure,
Well,
there is no, maybe we reach the backup limit, so there is no recreations for failures, but anything that didn't exist should continue to.
no, but it's more than that, right?
Yeah, I think in a normal job run, a single failure doesn't affect the entire job failure. It should retry the particular failure in parallel, continuing the rest of the job. It's not that a single failure terminates the entire job.
No, I guess what he's saying is that, like, if you reach the backup limit,
yeah, the
you're gonna
backup
delete
limit.
the active ones. But it's not only that. It's not only we want to keep the active ones. Like, there are cases where parallelism is less than completions, and you want to continue to finish the rest. So you need to continue to go all the way to the end.
So I guess there could be like three modes. One, the current one, do not remove running jobs or running indexes, and run all indexes, something like that.
I think run all indexes contains the first one.
I guess that's a low level detail, but we are in a much agreement about, yes, we want to have something like that. So we just need to figure out how we want to as that in the API.
The other thing I was thinking of is actually having a backup limit per index, but that's very hard to implement because we need to keep account for every index.
Yeah.
Yes, that wouldn't be feasible in the status unless we limit the number of completions very much, like 1 million or something.
I guess, like, yeah, I mean, at the higher level, I feel that the more generic requirement is that I want each index to execute and set a different failure policy, basically, not like job level one. It basically says like, if X number of indices fails, then the whole job fails, for example. And so you could basically say, you can easily, if you want every index to actually execute, then you can say that the whole job will only fail if my, like, number of, yeah, you set the number of indices, but then when do you stop trying an index? So that's the question. Anyways, so I feel that this is something useful. and I guess we will just create an issue linked to the existing ones and try to discuss their potential approach to this feature request, and then we'll bring it to SIGApps.
Sounds good.
Any questions? All right, we've got 6 minutes, 10 minutes for KubeCon. We've got our first maintainers track talk. Aldo?
Yes. So, well, first of all, next meeting, I guess, will be canceled because it's KubeCon. So we got a slot to present our working group, and at the time we sent the request, we didn't know what we were going to present because this was all starting up. So at this point, of course, I want to present a little bit of the history, our charter, and our pillars, or sorry, work streams. You know, job API, job queuing, and device support, specialized hardware support. So within each of those, if you have anything you would like to highlight, I can certainly mention the different proposals that have been sent. But I don't know if there is anything more concrete that can be presented. I think the most concrete things we have is the job API. I mean, the caps are merged and whatnot. And in terms of job queuing, we have the queue project within SIG scheduling. And we have topology aware scheduling in the specialized hardware support. But if you have anything else that you would like it to be included, please let me know. Maybe just like a couple of sentences for the thing you want to highlight. Yeah, ultimately this is a presentation of all of us, not just me. So please do let me know.
So I guess the goal is to, mention all things batch in this presentation, like everything related to batch going on under Kubernetes, core Kubernetes, and all involved SIGs. So yeah, please, as Aldo mentioned, if there are efforts related to batch, please mention it so that it's presented in this maintainers track presentation.
I don't understand the question from Das.
Yeah, basically, just one use case what we have in our company. Let's say you can queue stuff and so on. Is it possible to have some interface also to do a reservation system that, for example, I want to reserve four nodes to do some batch job execution in a later time frame. I reserve it, and then
Abdul presented such thing last week. You can find the link right there. Yes, that's one of the proposals that is still very early.
And some level of control of the reservations. So we want, for example, to ensure fairness of reservations, to limit reservations to certain time, let's say 3 days or a week in the month. Longer reservations get killed automatically after that, and stuff like that.
Yes, I think you can go to that doc and see what's already there and add your thoughts. Diana? Do you prefer to be called Diana or Diana?
What's that?
Do you prefer to be called Diana or Diana?
Either one is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Thank you. No, I was just wanting to I guess just see what, in order to see what we might contribute to the presentation, is there already a presentation document that we could look through ahead of time, or is it?
I'm currently working on it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I want to share with the entire group because might be a little bit too much.
No problem. I mean, just as long as
but-
it's available, we can review it if on request, just to see if there's anything I can contribute in any way.
Yeah, but if you want, let me know if it's something you want to include. And maybe you can share just
yeah, I think maybe we
skeleton.
can add the scheduler plugins in the subject, like gun scheduling or capacity scheduling. It is also built for the batch system.
Yes, yes.
I think it's fine to, like, if you have a draft, I mean, we could involve the community.
I think when you have a draft, then we can contribute to it, add something.
Sounds good. Yeah, and
Great. That'd be great.
the last thing I will include for sure is how people can get involved, because as we said earlier, we want to invite people to present here, right? There are different frameworks and bring their feature requests. So that will be there too.
We have 4 minutes. I have one like quick high-level subject. I don't know what your thoughts about how the working group has been going. I know that there is no specific focus, or a specific feature. It's more like a discussion forum for things batch. I find that useful. I have been finding that useful so far. Perhaps moving forward, maybe once some of these efforts that are going on becomes more concrete, I don't know how we want to handle that. Like, for example, dedicate time to every topic, or like dedicate a specific, or just leave it like the way that we're operating right now, on a week-by-week basis, like we just look at the agenda, encourage people to add items to the agenda for discussions. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any concerns about how the working group has been operating or going on so far, please speak up. All right.
Abdullah, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't manage to follow completely the meeting, so apologies if you mentioned this. But one thing, I think I pinged you offline as well, but there is this updates for the different SIGs in Kubernetes for KubeCon. There will be like in the keynote, there will be a Kubernetes project updates. I was wondering if you want to add a small line regarding this working group to also advertise it there. Would this be interesting? Because there's like if you want, there's a slot for SIG scheduling, but you can just give an update on the working group.
Can you give an example? Like how does that look like? Not sure.
So this is a single presentation during the keynote for like 15 minutes, where we give updates of the different projects under Kubernetes, different SIGs, for example.
Okay.
And then like SIG storage says what's new since the last KubeCon. And for SIG, if you want to give one for SIG scheduling, I was thinking maybe it's another place where we can kind of advertise the working group.
Oh, you mean like within SIG scheduling slide you mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's other stuff, but I was thinking mostly about this working group.
Right. Yeah. I mean that I think that's good. How do we do that? Like I just
There was a survey sent around, but I don't know if you got it or if it got missed. But in any case, if you have an update, you can also I can get you the survey link and you can maybe still submit it.
Yeah, the update is basically we have a new working group batch that's trying to advance the
And the
batch.
goals.
So
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just a very short update. It's nothing special.
Okay.
I'll do this, Diane, again. Just again for the feedback with the working group. We had a list of projects that at the beginning in one of the subgroups or subthemes, and we haven't really seen in many of those presentations. I'm wondering are we waiting for folks to, are we reaching out to those folks, or how's that working? Because I would like to see more of those, and I still need to do one myself for our project. But I was wondering that list of projects that kind of overlap the batch area in many ways. I'm not seeing many of those presentations in this forum, so I just kind of wanted to find out how that's being driven.
So there was no like outreach. So I guess that's a good point. Like to start basically asking the project that we've listed for them to come to the working group and present. So far the agenda, like every other week, has been like, there was already items in the agenda. We were waiting for a couple of presentations from NVIDIA that they got like pushed a couple of times. But I guess like we should start doing that. And maybe
and I'm willing to help with that if
that would be great.
It's helpful. Happy to do that. So I'll reach out to you to see how to move forward.
Okay, yeah, let's coordinate offline. And if you wanna take up like the task of reaching out to these various frameworks, that would be great.
Okay, sure.
And after KubeCon, we will also have a presentation maybe for Q, so that as like being one of the frameworks. We already presented that in SIG scheduling and SIG apps, but I think we should do it here as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.